All right. So up until 2019, Pastor Paula White Kane Fur, so many last names, bro.
Was she Mexican?
Right. She was the pastor at New Destiny Christian Center in Apopka, Florida. I hope I pronounced that right. If you're from Apopka, leave
Appaloosa, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. So on February 7th of 2025, Donald Trump announced the creation of the White House Faith Office to be led by White. She's very interesting, and we're probably going to show a video here in a little bit in regards to her strong beliefs, I guess you would say, and the way she runs her church and everything. But today we are going to be going over some of the churches. And what are we titling this, Joe? Faith Divided?
Faith Divided.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting because, we talk about religion a lot, especially our base religion. There's a lot of people that are drawn away from it. There's a lot of people that oppose it, and they call it structured religion and I think that there is some concern to it. Yes, there is. And I think there's some validity behind it as well as to why they turn away from the church. And today's focus, we really want to focus on the ones that are out there that we know are probably sending the wrong message, right? Televangelists are widely known. I remember growing up and watching sermons from the Crystal Cathedral. I don't know if you remember that one.
Oh, yeah.
Or Jim and Tammy Faye Baker, even Benny Hinn. There was a lot of these people that were on TV that, was a lot of background noise for moms and grandmas while they were cleaning or doing whatever the chores were.
Right.
And so you had nothing else but to kind of hear it in the background as well as you're burning ants in an anthill. But anyway, so to some degree, I agree to some of these people who cannot find religion or have faith in religion. And that's why we're going to talk about it today. We're going to talk about these individuals and the message they're sending and why we should be careful about getting the wrong message out there.
All right, everybody. Well, before we get started, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to Outspoken, share the show with everyone you know, and hit that bell notification icon to get updated whenever we upload a new episode. Let's get into this.
Let's do it.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We're so happy you joined the channel once again.
Yep.
And at the beginning of this, we were talking about Miss Paula White. She's got like 15 last names because of all of her marriages and all that kind of stuff. There is a video out there that was captured from asking for donations and money.
It was probably during one of her TV
specials or whatever.
Yeah.
Joe and I are going to let you see this video, and then we're going to comment on it. And you comment below what you think, too.
And I believe that when you honor God on Passover, starting on April 12th at sundown through Good Friday on the 18th and concluding on Easter Sunday, you can receive these 7 supernatural blessings for you and your house. According to Exodus 23, God will assign an angel to you. He'll be an enemy to your enemies. He'll give you prosperity. He'll take sickness away from you. He will give you long life. He'll bring increase in inheritance, and he'll give a special year of blessing. You're not doing this to get something, but you're doing it in honor to God, realizing what you can receive.
For your special Passover offering of $1,000 or more as the Holy Spirit leads, you will also receive the beautiful 10-inch Waterford Crystal Cross. Don't miss your moment to release 7 supernatural blessings and provision into your life.
My goodness. So right away, let's look at some of the obvious points here.
Yeah.
When you put a dollar amount,
just send me $1,000 and you'll be saved and have a special place in heaven.
When you are specific,
by my feet and my dog.
Exactly right. When you give a specific dollar amount and you have 7 points, if she's clear about it, don't do this expecting something in return.
Right.
Just have hope that you might, but for $1,000, your chances are much better. So that to me, looking from somebody who is, let's say, new to religion or seeking guidance from religion or just trying to find a basis. We've talked about, moral bases in past episodes. You see that it's going to send you running the opposite way. You're like, whoa. Is this about money? Is this, are they telling me they're going to give me these things or that only by giving money, these things are even possible? Now, let's not forget that the whole Passover, because this was the Passover commercial, clearly, right? It was the liberation of the Jews in Egypt, right? And God gave instructions that you put the lamb's blood over your door frames,
Right.
and the messenger of death would pass by and not take your firstborn. And in honor of that, of sparing the firstborn for the Israelites and taking the firstborn of the Egyptians, which were the masters, the slave masters, it allowed them to free and liberate the Israelites out of Egypt. So in honor of that, we celebrate Passover. Now you have this evangelist saying, hey, for $1,000, the miracles happen. The miracle of Passover has happened. It's already done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who are you as a just a person, as a servant of God, to say these things like, oh, you're going to get these 7 things, with a small donation of $1,000. Like, I don't understand that. And that to me is very offensive. And you shouldn't, I mean, there's a difference. There's this in our religion, there's a saying that, God comes first, God first. So whatever we get, God gets his share first, right? Because he's number one, right? So if that includes when you get paid, your money, instead of going to like Starbucks, to Carl's Jr., God, it even hurt me to say that. But, things like that, you have to give God first, right? Because it's a blessing. Just to wake up in the morning is a blessing. So we have to give. And that's just our belief. And for whatever reason, it was done back in the days, we do it now.
Well, tithing is a, important part of our structure. Now, a lot of stuff has gotten misconstrued, right? Because tithing, a lot of people will say, well, how much do you tithe? Somewhere it says 10%. That was an easy number to give. That's not how much you have to give, though, right? Yeah. It can be more and it can be less. It depends on, and the thing is you need to give joyfully, right? If you're giving your 10% and saying, okay, God, I'm miserable and I don't want to give this, but I know I have to give this 10% to you, don't give that 10%.
Yeah.
Because that's not the way it's supposed to be given. It's supposed to be given freely from your heart, and that you're joyful in that, right? And here's the thing, there is a big mistake, and a lot of us get into this, is that most of us go to, like you and I go to a church, right? Now, you can tithe to your church. And it can be the full amount, whatever you're going to tithe. If you want to consider that 10%, some people may say 15, 20. Some people may say, I only want to give 5, 6% or 1%, whatever it is. Whatever that number is for that individual, they end up giving it to the church, and they say, okay, well, the church can figure out how to do with my tithings. You can give an even smaller amount to your church, and you can decide where to give the rest of your tithings to, whether that's homeless people, whether that's to help a specific shelter or a organization that you feel really strongly with. One of the things that the churches do, most churches, can't say for all of them, but most churches will do, is part of the tithings, right? This is the thing. It's tough for people to understand. They're like, well, they're running it like a business, like this lady was, right? She's just flat out Miss White, Paula White, trying to make a bunch of money. They still have to keep the lights on. They have a gas bill.
Correct.
They've got a lot of stuff that they do have to pay for. So
Correct.
Money to the church is important for it to stay open. And in my heart, I believe that if you go to a church and you regularly attend, you should give something to it, right? It'd be like a movie theater said, we're going to do only based on donations. Well, you know how many people would go there and just watch movies for free and not donate anything? There'd be a lot of those people, right? And I'm telling you right now, there's a lot of people that go to the church and do the same thing. And they just assume that it's going to stay open. Even churches, even though they're exemption, right? They still have to pay bills. They still have rent or lease payments or whatever that stuff is. Now, the thing is, going back to what I was going to say, the churches typically work with folks that are around the world, and they give money to these different missionaries that are around the world spreading the gospel. And that's a big part of what we should try to do. So me as an individual, I could look up, and so I can say I don't want to give anything to my church, right? I'm like, you know what? I'm not giving to the church anymore. I'm going to find personally missionaries that are out there doing it, and you can find them, and yeah, you can give directly to missionaries. Yeah. So tithing is, man, there's no stamp, there's no specifics, there's no anything to it that says you must give all your tithing to your church, or you must give this specific amount to your church. That is not in there. It is from your heart. And all God asks you to do is take the first part, right? You're to give him in whatever capacity that is, again, to your church, to the missionaries, whatever you see, homeless people, whatever you see fit, that first part of your wealth, that first part of your paycheck, whatever you want to call it, goes to him. Because some people, you say, well, I don't work anymore. I'm retired. Well, that's still income coming in. Well, I'm I'm independently wealthy. I just own a bunch of, commercial real estate and stuff, and I have money coming in. That's income coming in that you can tithe off of, right? So, and again, it's not specifics. There's part in the Bible where it talks about the rich man comes up and basically gives a bag of gold, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the poor man that comes up and he has one coin. That's all he has. And he puts it down, and the rich man is like, haha, look at how much I give. I give so much more than you. And the, kind of parable to that is, well, as a rich man, you're giving very little of what you have. That person with the single coin gave everything they had.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference. Your humbleness and your desire to give your portion to the Lord is what is desired of all of us.
So guys, if you're interested about more about that, it's called the Widow's Offering. I think it's in Mark and Luke. But that's just part of the things that we're talking about today. It's not just that. We should give, like Jesus said, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God. So, and we belong to God. So, but on top of that, we're talking about these rich evangelists, right? These guys have so much. And I get why people are kind of drawn away from it. And I just want to focus on giving to the church. That's great. One of the things that we need to look at is, why are people straying from religion? I mean, what kind of message is being sent out there? Most of you have seen years ago, there was a video out there that this news in person, she was a young news reporter, went and asked Kenneth Copeland, another prominent figure in the gospel movement, about having this private jet. And, his thing was, originally what was said was that he cannot travel in a plane or a cylinder that is filled with demons, right? Calling humanity demons.
You said that you don't like to fly commercial because you don't want to get into a tube with a bunch of demons. Do you really believe that human beings are demons?
No, I do not. And don't you ever say I did. We wrestle not with flesh and blood, but principalities and powers.
And then when she called him on it, she was like, I did not say that. Like, he turned very devilish, right? And
he looked like Satan himself.
Yeah. And so that guy is, I think, the richest evangelist out there right now is the Kenneth Copeland. And so
for those of you that don't know who he is, he's the founder of Eagle Mountain International Church in Torrance County, Texas.
Man, between Texas and Florida, man, they have one of the wealthiest populace of
evangelists, yeah,
out there. Benny Hinn, Joyce Meyer, all these people. And let me tell you something. Everyone loves books. People love to read. And
right.
I love to read. I like to myself. Nice. I can't put down a little good Tom Clancy book. Sometimes I get involved in them. But there are books out there that when I was younger, when I started, well, not that young, but when I was having kids, I was clearly much younger. I bought these books called Left Behind. It was a series of books, and it was really based on the book of Revelations. And so, and they had kids' books. So I got my kids involved in reading them, and they loved them. They couldn't put them down either. I had the whole collection. I had the opportunity to, I forget his name now, it leaves me, but he lives in, one of the authors of the Left Behind series lives in Rancho Mirage. And I don't know if I ever told you, but when I did electrical, I went to his house.
Oh yeah,
it's beautiful. But those guys don't talk about. They don't have a church. They don't go. I mean, I'm sure they have a church they go to, but they're not evangelists. They don't do anything. They write books.
Right.
That they're authors, so they make money from selling books. You know what I mean? And they're giving a service, right? They're writing these books and blah. They're good books, and those kind of books I don't mind. But you find like Joyce Meyer, Joel Osteen. I don't know if Copeland does, but I think he does as well. They write books like self-help books.
Right.
Right. And I get it. There's men's daily devotional books, women's daily, and those, there's nothing wrong with that. Don't get me wrong. But, they have little passages from the Bible, and it kind of talks about it and what to look and how you could develop your day. They're just little God reminders of your day to have a positive outcome for your day, which I agree. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. But the self-help books, like how to live a Christian life and things, we're now, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're looking at it from an individual's perspective. My way of Christian living might not mesh with yours based on what you're getting from the Bible and what I'm getting from the Bible, right? So if we want, like most people say, this is a saying we all hear, if you want the facts, go to the source, right?
Right.
And what's the source? The Bible.
The Bible.
Absolutely. It's the Bible. Read the Bible, ask questions, ask your pastor, look at it, get a study Bible. And in the bottom, it gives you all kinds of references and where to look it up. And then come up with your own conclusion based on information that all derives from the Bible, not just from Joyce Meyer's book and how to be a better Christian, or Joel Osteen's How to Positively Live, or just great. If you know what you want to be a self-helper, then do that, but don't try to be an evangelist and sell your books, and because I think you push people away. And when you're living in $10.5 million homes in these lavish mansions, I think you're sending the wrong message. For example, we talked about this in length before, Jay. Do you remember we were talked about if you want to help someone that has an addiction problem like alcoholism, who do you think they're more prone to have an understanding of his problems? A person who's overcome it, who's lived through it and overcome it, or someone who just read about it in school? And who do you think has a better understanding and a better grasp on how to overcome it?
Somebody that's been through the minefield, that's experienced it.
Correct.
Absolutely.
And that's who you're going to look to, right? That's why they have sponsors, because, hey, this is what I'm going through, because they know exactly what you're feeling, what you're going through. They know exactly what to do or what to say to get you out of that predicament.
Right.
I think it goes the same way when you're looking at pastors or evangelists or whoever you want to call them. You have to look at it through the same goggles. If I have a problem, am I even able to go up to Joel Osteen and say, hey, man, I got a problem. Could you help me out with that? No. They're going to refer you to the hundreds of people that work under him, because you can't bother him with things like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're a peasant. You can't talk to him.
Or Joyce Myers, or especially Kenneth Copeland, because he probably has security around him. In our church, it's small enough, right? And you go up to the pastor, he greets us at the door. Both of them do. I used to go to a church. I remember my first time I got there. Beautiful campus, right? They had like a little Goodwill that helps. They hire like kids from troubled kids. They hire them, so they run the store and they kind of fund it. They had a nice little coffee shop. They worked there. It was great. A little daycare. Everything. It was nice, huge campus. I get there and they have the morning announcements, right? Hey, this is what we're doing. But normally what they do, coffee. Man, I'll give me a garden of coffee. Everything was, good. We sit down here. I'm ready to listen to the word of the day. And it's a screen with a guy at some other campus.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah. This is digital? I'm like, where's the guy?
Yeah.
Like, not.
Was that here in this valley or the other valley?
No, this valley.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I know exactly which. I went to the same one.
And I'm thinking, man, there's not a live person here? Like,
no.
Like, I felt the disconnect right away. Like,
yes,
bro.
100%.
Like, at this point, I'm just coming for the motion to feel good about myself and not to hear the word.
There you go. Yep.
And so I'm like, okay, this ain't for me. And I'm not going to lie, it drew me away a little bit. I'm like, man, that's not, religion has changed clearly, because coming from being a Catholic to a non-denominational, you're expecting certain things, right? You're expecting some interaction. Because the same that works in a Catholic church, right? Everybody comes in, the priest is sometimes at the door greeting everybody. And then there's this whole parade that comes up the center, right? The little kids with the big old crosses and candles and little bells.
Yeah,
all kinds of stuff happening. There's a lot going on. You remember those days? I went to a Catholic school, so I went to OLPA.
I visited. I had a good buddy of mine that lived a couple doors down from me, and I went with them a few times.
Yeah, so there's like a parade that goes up, and the priest gets up there, blah blah blah, and then a lot of standing, kneeling, sitting, standing, kneeling.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff going on. So there's some interaction. So after, and then again, his whole parade goes. When the church is over, goes out and he greets everybody outside. So there's still some connectivity. There's still people, you're still able to talk to the priest and greet him and talk to him, blah, blah. He's reachable. Pastors, like in our church, again, same thing. But then, like you said, when you start disconnecting from the people that you serve, how can you meet them at their level? If I'm going through some problems, let's say financially, how is this priest who has a $10.5 million mansion going to understand my dilemma?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you think about it, no knock on the Catholic religion or anything like that. However, you have these guys that dress in, robes and stuff like that. And a lot of times, even in Christian religions, like if you get married, let's say, and you hire your own pastor to do it, a lot of times they'll dress in like a nice robe and stuff, and that's very, very ceremonial. Our pastor at our church, right? We talk to him almost every Sunday, like walk up to him, give him a hug, shake his hand, and, just chat about whatever the sermon or, deal of the day, whatever it is. He's completely approachable. And how does he dress on stage? Totally normal.
Casual. I think the only thing missing is an AR-15 or something like that.
But the thing is that
just
he's
kidding.
exactly how we are able to approach him like any other person in the church. Like you could walk up to, I'm more comfortable approaching him than some of the people that attend the church, right? They look more stuffy, right? So,
and it throws you off guard every time when he comes up to you. He's like, "Hey, Joe, how you doing?" I'm like, "You remember my name?"
Yeah.
I haven't been here in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's just so, and you're right, though. It's so welcoming. And yeah, there's some people there that I don't talk to because they kind of scare me. But
yeah, they got resting face.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it at that. So, but it is very important as somebody that is new to a church that comes in for them to feel comfortable, right?
Yeah.
And welcome. And like you said, I know exactly what campus you're talking about. Well, one of the campuses that I
there's
went
many.
to, I don't know.
That's how they are now.
They're all over the valley. I think the one we're talking about, it's in the top 10. I know it's in the top 15 largest church in the country. But they use the populace of all the campuses put together to, because it is under one, and I don't want to use the word LLC, but that's basically what it is, right? So
yeah, it's scary to me that, I appreciate that they have these, like our church, it has a little area where you could still go hear the pastor speak. But if you have disruptive kids, you could go in there and not disrupt the entire congregation listening to the word, right? Because there shouldn't be any disruptions. There shouldn't be anything like that.
Right.
They have that. I like those because I always call those like convenient rooms. Because I don't know if you remember. I don't think we ever went to the movies when I lived in Vegas. But like if you go to Vegas and you had kids, in the very back they have these little rooms that they have a big slider door, and you go in there, close the slider door, and if your kid's crying and stuff, you're still watching a movie with everybody else in the theater. It's got speakers inside, but it's soundproof so they can't hear your baby crying or
that's pretty
nursing
cool.
or whatever the case is.
No, we never did go.
But I love the theaters about that, So the same thing goes I don't see anything wrong with that. That's great. Yeah. Even ones that have daycare and talk about, do things that are related to God. And I think that's great. But I think when you step away from the norm and you start allowing, we're going to see mark my word, we're going to see a lot of changes with churches coming up with AI coming out and spreading so much and so fast. And it's kind of scary. You're going away from that connectivity. I always, now that we are in the position that you and I are, I always relate everything to the times of Jesus. Was Jesus approachable? Absolutely.
Right.
He was humble. He walked amongst everybody. He told his disciples, you first have to be a slave. You have to be a servant. You're here to serve. He even said it. He didn't come, for anything but to bring disarray, to bring division, right? Because of his word and what he was talking about. But it's funny now how people look at these things and their works are contrary to what the Bible says. Yeah. And that's scary to me only because you're pushing people away. You're sending the wrong message. And I think people are so trained. They're so like sheep, they're just, they're following. And people nowadays are not looking at religion how it was intended, which was it wasn't based on religion. It was based on the teachings of God and his new covenant, which says that, we've been forgiven. We just have to live a righteous life. We have to live godly life. We've gone away from that thinking that, well, you know what, if I give money or if I donate or if I do this, I'm secured a golden ticket. Kind of like in Willy Wonka, you get the golden ticket, right?
Yeah.
And you get those pearly gates and,
right.
Good old Peter up there is like, I bought my way into heaven. You know what I mean? Yeah. Which we all know you can't do that. You can't buy your way into heaven.
No,
and nothing that you do is going to get you there. It's how we live. Right. And that's very important. I think we're getting away from that. And I think they don't want to do the work, bro. Like they don't want to do the work. They're like, I'm not going to put the work in. I'm just going to go to church. I'm going to donate. And then as soon as I leave, I'm going to start. Bro, I used to see it all the time at OLPH, all the time. Right? People will be at church, blah, blah, blah. As soon as they're outside, man, them church ladies talking to my mom. Did you see what's her name, what she was wearing? Oh my God. In church, really? And I'm like,
being all judgy.
Right, bro. And I didn't say nothing. I'm looking around kind of like, are we almost gone? Because I knew that what came after church was a little bit of food, a little bit of breakfast. And that's what little fatty was looking for was breakfast. And so that's what, as a child, that's what I was looking for. But now you look back and you're like, did y'all just come out of church and you're here gossiping? That's like a no-no. You know what I mean?
Right.
People do it. So now,
but you know what's funny is a lot of the old school, especially, and not saying the guys don't do it, but the old school women from churches, that was their thing. I was raised in a Baptist church, right? Southern Baptist to be specific, right? Fire and brimstone, man.
Yeah.
Pastors yelling at everybody. Organ on one side, piano on the other. The board up on the top that said how many people attended today, last week. all that kind of stuff.
Oh, hey, they be talking about your sins right in front of everybody right there.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Jay, oh boy, that boy needs to change his ways. So after you would leave like the main hall, you would go right across like a entry hall into another area, and that's where the kitchen was. And there'd always, every Sunday, man, there's a potluck or something going on. People feeding people, and everybody bringing whatever, all kinds of good stuff, dude.
Biscuits.
Oh my gosh, biscuits were flying everywhere. So
they never last at your house when your mom makes them.
Yeah, no, they gone. Yes, and part of that was brought into that whole fellowship thing. To this day, around the world, regardless of where you go, if you visit even a poor country in the world and the people are introduced to you, and if you have a translator or you speak that language, they happen to speak English or whatever, one of the first things they want to do is invite you into their home and feed you. Right. This goes beyond our normal thing that we would say that all humans have a desire, this and that. God has instilled in all of us to be with one another in fellowship, right? Yeah. And eating is it is a thing. Like if you eat an apple here in the United States, take an apple to Russia, take an apple to South Africa, take an apple to Australia. Of course, they'll eat it upside down, but every country of the world is going to enjoy the apple the same. They're going to eat it the same, right? And it's a universal thing that doesn't change based on your religion, your color, where you're from,
it changed when Eve ate it, just saying.
Well, we don't know that was an apple. So.
That's true.
Apples get a bad rap for that
they
whole
do.
deal.
I don't think it was even mentioned.
It was a fruit, and I guess somebody just said, an apple sounds like a
good fruit.
Like
it was someone that clearly did not like apples. It was clearly someone that didn't like apples.
That's why they put the worm in the apple. It's like, well, that's not quite a snake, but I mean, close enough, I guess.
But you're 100% right and correct. And it was funny because when I was younger, I went to a Native American Catholic church on the res, and after service, big old tables came out. People brought all kinds of food. Little Joe ate about 3-4 fry breads. On there,
Indian fry bread.
Indian fry bread, bro.
Stop it.
So you're right. There's something to say about that unity after church. It doesn't just stop there. Unfortunately, though, the lives that we live nowadays, it's so fast, so quick paced that, people come out of church and go straight to work, right? Maybe they'll stop. Recently have been able to go grab something to eat and then we go on our ways because, we have responsibilities. But religion in nature is so controversial, right? Because it was taken from the Bible, and then all of a sudden you get all these different religions. And no knock on the religions, but yes, there is a knock on the religions because, you get people that all of a sudden, you got Joseph Smith who finds this Jesus appeared in California all of a sudden, or in the States. And, you got a whole, the Book of Mormon going on, or you got the witnesses who change some of the writings in the Bible because they have their own Bible, right? And it's in that Bible, things are not the same. They've changed the wording, and they say they have a more clear translation than the King James version. And still they believe that Jesus is the Archangel Michael, and there's just different things that just everybody starts taking a little bit of what they believe, or whoever created the church believed at the time, and ran with it. And people, just like evangelists, they're so convincing that people believe that, right? And they go and they run with it. Like, really? If I give you $1,000, I'm going to get like 7 blessings? Man, here's $2,000. You know what I mean? And so that's how we think. That's unfortunately how brainwashed people are nowadays. That they think that by giving money in that way, because an evangelist say, I'm going to give you 7 blessings, you give me $1,000. First off, you guys need to really slow your rope and know that just waking up in the morning is a blessing. Waking up to your family, waking
absolutely.
up to that's a blessing. Not this $1,000 you'll get 7 blessings in a good year. Religion, in a sense, is to blame for some of this, for that one sheep from the 99, right, that goes astray, for those prodigal sons that disappear. But on the other hand, we're talking about adults now. We're talking about people who have the use of the brain. Pick up a book, read the Bible. Use common sense. Don't fall for what people say. Don't fall for what they're. Take a look at it, study. People it's like when you go buy a new car, do you just say, oh, that's a very popular car, I'm going to buy it? No. Or do you actually look, at least I know I do. I look at reviews. I look at how the fuel consumption. I look at what warranties come with it. What guarantees does it have? How many, does it come with free oil change for the first 4 years? Or, what am I looking at that's going to convince me to say this car is better than the rest, right? Same thing with a house. When you buy a house, you just buy the cheapest one because that's what you can afford, or do you look into it first and say, all right, look, this is an investment. I'm going to put all this money into it. I'm not going to buy something for $150,000 and I have to invest another $150,000 to get it up to par. That's just a waste of money, right? You're not going to do that. Might as well just jump in there and get a newer house that has no issues, but you're still going to look into it. What's the best area? What's the schools around it? The accessibility to grocery stores or work or, all kinds of things, right? You look into these things. Same thing goes with anything that you do, electronics, computers. Should I get Samsung? Should I get an iPhone? Which works better for me? What am I looking for? What features does the iPhone have that the Samsung doesn't have, or vice versa? These are the things that we do. Why won't we do that for religion? Why won't we look at things and say, what does this speak versus this one? What is the truth? Why does this have this added and not this? Why is it like this? Why does it remove in the 10 Commandments to talk about having idols before me and things like that, but it's not on the 10 Commandments of this religion? That's weird.
Right.
Let's look into these things. Invest the time that you do in buying a computer, that you do in buying a car, that you do in buying that top that, at the store, because we do, right? When you go to the store, you're looking at shorts. How does it fit? Is it long enough? Is it short enough? Does it show my glutes in the manner that I want it to be shown? Things like that nature. So if we're able to invest, or you and I, let's look at that gun. How many rounds does it hold? Can you add more? So
why you have to bring up old stuff for me?
I got to bring up all the good stuff. My point is, if we're afforded the time to invest in making simple decisions every day of what fuel to put in our cars, what cars to buy, what houses to buy, what shirt to buy, what book is best to read, if we invest that, why can't we invest the same way in finding the truth behind religion, behind what it is that's going to ultimately really save your life, and extend it, right? So that's what I don't understand. Don't fall for these evangelists that are out there preaching that the only way to salvation is through money, donations, and things like that. Remember that nothing you do is going to save you. There's no acts that you could do. Only thing we are to do is to live lives how God intended us to live, in a godly way, in a righteous way, loving our neighbors and our enemies. So anything away from that, God, you guys are lost. Yeah. Like we were. I'm not going to lie. You know what I mean? So we cannot, and we can't afford to lose any more Christian brothers and sisters out there. We got to find the truth. Don't let these guys fool you with their fancy words, with their crystal cathedrals, with their fancy churches and their powers to heal and things like that. It saddens me to see when people fall for those things. And time after time, pastor after pastor, evangelical pastor after evangelical pastor get proven wrong, get caught up in some kind of controversy. Something happens. I think the message is clear. Stop believing these guys that have all these networks and looking at, my mom was a devout person to Praise the Lord channel or
that's the PTL.
Praise the Lord.
PTL.
And so it was all about all these evangelists and all these things. And, but at the end of the day, none of that matters, really. Not those people. You got to go to church. You got to go and find one that's going to be good for you, I guess, and find somebody like I have Jay, who is kind of like my Jesus bodyguard. He's the one that keeps me straight if I start to stray a little bit, and then on the other side, I have my son, who's my other Jesus bodyguard, and
which is awesome, man.
Yeah. So we have to do that. And we have to do what's best for our families, for ourselves, always putting God first. So don't believe these people. Don't believe the hype, man. I'm telling you, it's going to get you nowhere. So those of you who are like stepping that line, they're on that fence and don't know which way to go. Always, again, refer to the Bible. Any questions you have is answered in that book. That's I think the most sold and most published book in the world. Am I wrong on that?
That's correct. And it's also the most translated book. It was the first book ever put on a printing press. I mean, for something that's fake, that's pretty crazy how important it has been treated throughout history. Just to kind of go back on something that you've been talking about here for a little bit, and that's how is it that we go out and we research all this stuff and we don't research our religion and everything? I think the difference for some people, especially kids, right, is that you grow up in a house that either believes in God, possibly atheist, or maybe agnostic, right? Where they're like, yeah, I believe in a higher power, spirit, or whatever, but we don't subscribe to going to church and any of that kind of stuff. And I think so sometimes religion becomes a part of your existence as a child, right? And the problem is, and we did this when we were kids, had nothing to do with religion, but you kind of rebel against your parents, right? So whatever your parents say, you kind of do the opposite. So that's why there's quite often that you have pastors or priests, or, well, I guess priests wouldn't have it, but where you have a religious leader and they have kids, and the kids become just complete turds, right?
Yeah.
Because they basically rebel against the religious parent or parents, and they don't want to have anything to do with it. So they go the opposite direction. So yeah, I believe that we are kind of tied. Like, the reason I'm where I'm at is because of my mom and my grandmother would be the two that would be the most, influential to my Christianity through time. Now, of course, I slipped away, just like I think a lot of teenagers and stuff do as time goes on. And it's not like I grew up in this perfect Christian household. My dad was, I don't want to say atheist, but somewhere between atheism and agnostic, right? He believed that a man named Jesus existed. I remember him telling me straight up, he goes, "Oh, he existed. There's no doubt. Sciences and history and all this, there's no way that man would have been written about so much, and especially by Greeks and Romans, people that would not have written about him if he didn't have some kind of influence, in history." So, but my dad never went to church. He just wasn't that guy. So I grew up in a household where I made a choice. And the cool thing was, I remember my dad telling, when I was in college, my dad, I talked to him about religion and stuff. And at that point I don't want to say I had completely went away. I've always believed in God since day one, but I had drifted a lot. I hadn't been to church and man, I don't know how long. I can't even tell you, at that point. And because there's probably over 20 years that went by that I never stepped foot in a church, right? Over 20 years, at least. And then I would go to one and then not go back for another 5 years or whatever, So the church we're currently going to now is the most consistent one that I've been going to since I was a child, the First Baptist church that I used to go to.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Definitely.
So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. I just think that a lot of times folks are picking against a church or religion because of the things that are posted, right? That are put on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. And these people, like this young lady that we just showed, Paula White, about, they have this way of turning people off from God. And that's not who God is. And these people are running a business. I hate to say it, but that's what they're doing. She's trying to raise money for a bunch of people that work at a big church that probably has a, I know they're supposed to be 503Cs, but they probably have some business name, an LLC behind it, and if you dig deep enough, and they're not going to be places that are probably kind of like we talked earlier, us going to that one place that there was nobody on stage. It was just a big video screen. It was like, imagine going to a movie theater and that's where you go to watch a sermon at a movie theater. That just doesn't make any sense. Like, it makes no sense. Jesus would preach to people on the top of a rock in a field. There was no church. There was no building. There was no anything like that. And so that's what it's all about. The fact that we have buildings and nice seats and air conditioning or heater, depending on what part of the country or world you're in, that is just all fluff and stuff. That has nothing to do with the message. It has nothing to do with the belief. It has nothing to do with us being Christians and following our faith and, communing with others. That building is just, they call it the house of God, but that building has nothing to do with anything. It's all the people that have gathered together that create it and make it the house of God, right? So we have to clear a lot of the bad name that I call it organized religion, has created out there and put a bad taste in people's mouths, honestly. A lot of folks are turned off by it. And
see, here's the thing that I look into. And this is for all you out there listening. I'm going to leave you with this little thing right here real quick. Is that if you want to, there's so many stuff about so many religions out there, so many things. And if you need to know exactly which is the true religion or where the true answers lie, I believe this. The answers are in that's where they're at, right? So Charles Taze Russell, Joseph Smith, Muhammad, Buddha, all have burial sites. They've all been buried. They're dead. Go to Jesus's tomb. And you know what? It's the only one that's empty. Only one you're not going to find anything.
Yeah.
Because the true God had risen. So I leave you with that, guys. The truth is in the grave. Find out.
If you can find it online, I saw it once. I don't remember where it's at, but a guy asks AI and he says, hey, what if historically, if you were to say there was one religion that makes the most sense and that could be the most true, answer what it is in one word. And AI like pauses for a minute and then it says Christianity. And he says, and why is that? And it starts to go through all the reasoning. And then one of the things that it brings up is that Jesus was resurrected. The resurrection of Jesus is one of the biggest factors in making a religion true. So yeah, totally agree, guys. We're not trying to push anything on you, but boy, we hope you make the right decisions. Because
by the way, Charles Taze Russell, he was the founder of the Jehovah's Witness.
I got this asked many years ago, and we'll get out of here because I know this is a little longer than normal. I was asked, I said, the guy told me, he said, hey man, I know you're a Christian and everything. And, I don't have, he was really cool. He was like, I don't have anything against it, but he goes, you know what, man, what if you live your entire life, your whole life, and you lived a lie? Like there is no God at the end of this. You close your eyes for the last time and there's nothing, just blackness. Your brain's gone. You don't see, feel, everything's done. It's done and done. And I'm like, yeah, no, I know what you're saying. I'm like, and I actually don't have a problem with that because which I know that's not true. I know there is a end after the end on this whole thing. But if that's true, and at the very end, we close our eyes for the last time and there's nothing there, you're telling me that I went through and tried to live my life the best I could, believing in something that was, to be better, to better mankind, to be a better person out there in the world, to be a good person, to forgive others, to help fellow man, all these things. And I believed in a deity that didn't exist. I don't know if there's such a problem with that. I said, let me reverse that question on you. What if I'm right? So when you close your eyes for the last time and now you're meeting a maker that you never wanted to have anything to do with, what if I'm right?
Crazy, huh?
So I'll leave it at that. Hey, listen, guys, before we get out of here, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to Outspoken, and share the show with everyone you know. And hit that bell notification icon to get updated whenever we upload a new episode. All right, everybody. Well, take care of one another.
Be better, do better. And as always,
God bless America.
I beat you to it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Love you guys.
See you next week. Love you guys. God bless.